Alright guys, it's time for another video here at Grand Theft Adventure, where I present you epic and mind-blowing stories that could be right out of movies or computer games. Today I have brought a special guest to the show. A guy who has pulled off something so incredible and crazy that he ended up in the Egyptian jail for 3 days, and that was when he was only 22 years old. Not only did he climb the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is a criminal offense in itself, but he also managed to capture the whole escapade on his GoPro and smuggled the footage out of jail in a way that would even make Tom Cruise jealous. In the next hour, he's gonna walk us through, step by step, how he avoided the guards, what it felt like to stand on top of the ancient world, how pleasant the Egyptian jail is, and he will share the original footage captured by his camera. Let me introduce to you my dear friend, Mr. Bane.
Hey man, how you doing?
As you can see, I'm a fake background in Bali, living
Yeah,
the life.
yeah. You're in Bali. I'm in a bookstore.
So to give the viewers probably a quick overview, could you tell the viewer what they have to know about you and what you're currently doing?
All right. Well, in 2018, when the incident happened, I was at that point traveling the world for a year. And it's funny because at the time I had this idea in my head. I was going to travel the world for a year and then go home and everything just be normal again. But the thing is, when you leave for that period of time, and when you live like that, especially at that age, I was 22 years old. You can't really come back because you become a different person. So there's nothing really to come back to. You enjoy some of the same things, and you're excited to see some people and everything, but stepping back into your old life becomes exceedingly difficult. So what ended up happening from there is I never really let off the gas pedal. Moved around to something like 52 countries now. What are you at, by the way?
75 plus 2 that are not even on a map yet.
Yeah, so a couple to go. Um, but yeah, it never really ends, and then you end up meeting a lot of like-minded people, and sort of snowball that way, and that becomes your lifestyle. But COVID, just like with everybody, it threw a wrench into everything, and then I had to get serious for a little bit. So I became a commercial diver and underwater welder, and then more recently, I've sort of angled into a corporate job and position. Because with diving specifically, the older you get, the drier you get. I figured if I was just going to keep getting drier and be in the water less, then I'll do the water for fun. And for anyone watching, that's actually how me and Dom met. We were doing our dive master training on Koh Tao together. A very unique experience in that, having a place like that to yourself with very little worry in the world. And yeah, and so that's me in a nutshell. From one thing to another, trying to find my place like everyone else.
Nothing to worry about is also actually the kind of mindset you gotta get when we dive into the story that you're gonna tell us now. So you went to Egypt. What was your plan doing in Egypt? Why did you end up there?
Sure. So it was September of 2018. So at this point, I'm 8 months into my world trip. I'd done Central and South America. I'd done most of Europe, and so the next geographically on my list, but also on my sort of bucket list of places I wanted to go, was obviously Egypt. That's a big travel mecca. Take a picture in front of the pyramids, enjoy the ancient architecture, and have your mind blown for a little bit. Um, and so that was already on the list. What ended up happening wasn't on the list. It was an idea that I maybe had and mentioned to some people, as like a cool thing to do. I mean, everyone's seen a viral clip of somebody climbing the Great Pyramids. So it was an idea in the back of my head. But what ended up happening is I got there, I landed in Cairo, and then I went to the pyramid site, and I enjoyed it, and its magnificence and its beauty. And it is really being that close. And in a vacuum, I mean, there's taller buildings and there's heavier buildings, and sure, but the fact, like, what it's built out of, and when it was built, and who built it, and the mystery surrounding it, it's one of the most fascinating places in the world. So immediately fell in love with it, and then, like I said, I had this idea in the back of my head before, and I couldn't shake the thought. So I figured, while I'm here, I have a day. I fly home in a few days. While I'm in Cairo, I'm going to go to the pyramid site again and then just see them. And then when I come back from Luxor, I'll go a third time, and then I'll maximize. Like, how many times does this person get to see the pyramids? If while I'm here, if I go 3 times, entry is cheap enough, I'll just go see them. And so I went there, and I'd already seen them, so I kind of knew where to go and where to walk and what to expect and who to avoid, and um, the the panhandlers and the other tourists, and I knew sort of where to get the best angles of alone time with the structures. And then yeah, just impulsively, I was there with another English guy. I hadn't mentioned it that day to anybody. It was an impulse, it was like an overwhelming urge. I just the thought process was, if I don't do it now, then this is something that'll never happen. For me, I'll never stand up there, and I can't tell you exactly why that specifically is. I can't describe it as anything more than an urge to do something that I knew I would regret in a way not doing. So why that's important to the story is it wasn't sneaky or premeditated in any way, and it obviously wasn't smart. It wasn't a heist film. I didn't bribe a guard and sneak past the fence and go up at night and stay so no one sees me. No, this was peak tourist hours, hundreds of people around me, and I put my GoPro in my mouth and I hit record, and I just beelined it straight for the top of the pyramid. Um, so yeah, that's the intro to the story. Heading up the pyramid.
I just want to know. So, okay, you didn't tell really anyone beforehand, right? Um,
No, in fact, I didn't know.
so you didn't make it
Yeah.
like, okay, it was in the back of your mind, just for the understanding. But then, like the moment or like the day you arrived at the pyramids for the third time, it was not like I need to do this. It was just like, oh yeah, let's see the pyramids again. And then at some point, the urge became really strong, and you were like, okay, I'm gonna
Yeah,
do it.
exactly. Yeah, it started just getting stronger and stronger and stronger until it was overwhelming, and then it went from urge to decision. I had decided to climb the pyramids, um, and that whole thing happened like maybe in like a 15-minute window where like I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this now. From the decision to do it, to taking my first step on the pyramid was about 15 minutes. So, um, yeah, it wasn't a lot of like anticipation or anxiety or anything like that. It was excitement, but not overwhelming. And then I
Hmm.
started going. It took me about 8 minutes to summit. I still have the full recording, so I know pretty much exactly how long it took me to get to the top. It took me 8 minutes to summit from the bottom to the top, and about 5 steps out, they started yelling at me. And now this was back in 2018, and they had security. Nowadays, security is much worse. Nowadays, the consequences are much worse. Now there's jail time involved, and it's a whole mess. So what you have left is these sort of limestone stepping stones all the way up. They're about knee height, so just as if they're like if you're on a stair climber and you go 2 or 3 at a time, that's about how high they were. So it's not a difficult thing to climb. But at the time, and in fact, to anyone listening with a brief history of people climbing the pyramids, people were allowed to climb the pyramids up until the 80s. So we're talking about thousands of years of people summiting these things, because originally the pyramids had a marble finish, and they were flat on the sides. And then whether it was gold tipped or not, some places described as gold tipped or not, it had a different material tip. So it was completely flat all the way to the surface. Now over the years, with different conquering nations and different wars and history is as history does, that marble was removed and sold, and the gold as well. For most of history, people had been climbing the pyramids, and it was a big tourist thing. You'd climb the pyramid, take a picture at the top, and they were sort of covered in tourists. And I understand why you would stop people from doing that, is to stop damage and sort of make them last for generations and generations. But in the 80s, they stopped doing it, and around 2002, it became an offense. About 20 years after they stopped letting people climb, it became an offense to climb. And then just more recently, I think it was 2021, there's a famous YouTuber, he climbed it, and then after that, they really locked down and stopped changing rules. But
Hmm.
basically, I climbed, to me 8 minutes, and then I got to the top. Now here's this description of the top, and
How did you feel when you were climbing up? So you said the guys down were already yelling. Like, did you have,
yeah,
I don't know, like
so,
what, were you pumped?
so
Were
no
you like, okay, I'm gonna make it?
no one chased after me, but about halfway up the climb, I realized that there's no turning back, because if you climb half the pyramid or if you climb the whole pyramid, you're not in any less trouble with like the less amount of pyramid that you climb. You're not in trouble if you don't climb, and you are in trouble if you do. So about halfway is when I started to like actually think about, oh, this is real. This is I've now just made a commitment to talking to authorities and to getting in trouble. And I didn't exactly know what was ahead of me, but I knew I'd have to pay some fine or do something. And so yeah, about halfway, I realized it, and there's a point in the video where I turned my head just to see, and it was the first and only time that I looked behind me. And I was at that point I was worried because what crossed my mind is if someone's following me, then like I'm also responsible for their safety, not just my own. So I looked back to see if someone was following me. No one was. No one had even taken one step on the pyramid. Because the funny thing is, you can't go anywhere from up there. They know exactly where you are, and you can't escape. So they have four guys waiting on each side, and eventually they'll come. Eventually they'll get thirsty. Um, so yeah, so then I slowed down at that point and finished the climb. And then I took the last few steps on the top of the pyramid. Now here's the fascinating part. The pyramids, and a lot of people don't know this, but the pyramids are right next to Cairo. So Cairo's a city of like 10 million people. It's huge, sprawling, like Mexico City, or it's about as like widespread as Mexico City. It's not vertical like Bangkok or New York, but it's a giant city. Um, so standing on top of the pyramid, you can see into the distance on one side, just like empty desert, and then you turn your head to the 180 degrees, and you can see all of Cairo again, sprawling as far as your eyes can see. So it is a beautiful viewpoint. Not that I'm saying anyone should do this, but it is it is something that was worth seeing. And what when we wrap this up, the question I always get is, do you regret it? And I'll make sure to dive into that at the end. But the the material of the limestone of the pyramid, and this was fascinating. And at first, I kind of came full circle. At first, it kind of pissed me off, and then I thought it was kind of cool, and then I came back to sort of making me angry. So what it is there's engravings all along the surface of the pyramid of people's names, and it's interesting because it's like Latin script and Arabic and Chinese and Japanese and Hebrew and um, whatever other script. There's the Russian Cyrillic. There's people's names written into the top, and the years again dating back to like 1940, 1930, 1920, and I'm sure very, very much older. These things have been there for 1,000 years, and they've been bare like that for a very long time as well. So you can go through and you sort of have a collage of all the names of the people who've been there before you and all the things. So I thought that was fascinating. And then you realize, okay, they're making this ancient structure that's sort of belongs to all of humanity. They're making it about them, and they're making themselves a part of it. So then you come back and you realize, oh, this is extremely selfish.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and it is in a way beautiful. I can't deny all these generations of different nations and different writing systems, all sort of in on the peak of the pyramid, and different messages. And I can't remember any message that stood out. They were mostly actually in different languages that I couldn't understand. But I do remember thinking that it was beautiful and fascinating, and then also sort of thinking that it was selfish and not quite the thing to do. Which is why I made the decision to leave no trace. I didn't move a single stone. Um, I kicked around some dust, maybe that had settled on the side of the pyramid. Because that's a question that I get a lot too. Is did you do any damage? And I don't believe so. It was the limestone has made it through thousands of years of weathering, and
Yeah.
there's a thin layer of dust on top of it. But
Mhm.
you're not very easily breaking off a piece of any of that. They're not as fragile as you might think. Which
Mhm.
goes to show how fascinating it is actually how they were built, because they're to an extent indestructible.
Because I did a little bit of research in it as well, I found some pictures where literally people were having like coffee up there, where people were just kind of having, yeah, almost like a picnic with the whole family back in the days. So for me, it's also it's in between. Like, of course, nowadays we could say like, okay, it's something you shouldn't do, and obviously, like with jail time and everything, they make sure that not too many people do it. But on the other side, I also don't see much of a damage done, especially if you don't leave graffitis or anything behind. You take footage and then you go down. We'll come later on to it, where I also think it makes sense that not too many people do it. I think you probably have to say something about it as well. But let's get back to, okay, so you're standing on top of it. And I remember you told me there was a thing about the pyramids that no one really knows, that you only see when you're on top of it, right?
So, a couple things. Well, the top isn't it. I mean, pyramid. The shape goes into a point, but like I said, the materials were removed for various reasons. So the top is actually flat. It's like the size of like an average apartment bedroom. So there's quite a bit of room to sort of move around and walk around. And the pyramids aren't actually. This part's interesting. The pyramid isn't actually four sides. It's actually eight because it's curved ever so slightly to the middle of each of the four sides. Um,
Mhm.
and you can see that a little bit clearer when you're up there because again the stones are cut to perfect angles. And I again there's a little bit of panic at that point too, but I don't know if you can make it out in the video, but if there are sections of eight ever so slightly, so it's a giant octagon. Yeah, and then so now here's the thing. So I spent about an hour up there, just sort
Mhm.
of taking pictures and hanging out and laying in the middle and staring at the sky. And now I realize I have to come down, and I'd look over the edge periodically. And at this point, a crowd had sort of formed around the side that I went up, and there was two police cars in the crowd. Um, and so I knew it was going to be time to come down eventually. So I sort of said my goodbyes. I stood in the middle of the pyramid, and I had this thought process like, okay, well, it'd be really nice if the aliens came right in a second, because they'd think I'm the king of the world. They could take me away, and the Egyptian authorities can't get me. I started my descent at this point, and then the volume sort of while I was on the top, I couldn't hear anything because I guess the way it's shaped, like none of the or maybe they weren't yelling, maybe they were just waiting or what was happening, but I couldn't hear the murmurs of the crowd. It was peaceful. It was a small bedroom on top of the world, and I was alone.
Mhm.
I started my descent, so I step over the ledge and start my way down, and I hear like a roar of like crowd chatter, and the officers were sort of yelling up at me, and then as I got closer and closer to the ground, it got louder and louder and louder, and people were sort of yelling at me from the crowd, like which direction to go to get down, which actually kind of I don't want to say pissed me off. It didn't piss me off, but it was. I think they were doing more harm than good because it wasn't actually difficult to come down, and I'd already come up, so I knew what to expect, and I was going relatively slow. So them telling me where to go didn't add or subtract to the situation. It was just noise again, like overwhelming noise. And I come down the last few steps, and I'm sort of standing there now, not quite eye level to the crowd, but stage level to the crowd. Like a rock concert and a bunch of people in front of me. And everyone started clapping. Everyone started clapping, and it was either I think it was a combination of things. It was a combination of oh, he's police are about to get him. Oh, that's a really cool thing. Or oh, you got down safely. So I think it was a combination of all those things. Everyone had their own motivation, but the whole crowd started clapping. So I did one of these, and then there was two police officers waiting for me on the final step, and they each took one of my hands and they let me down from the last step, and they didn't let go.
On the way down, so was there any like, let's say, like near miss or anything? I don't know, because you said like you go down. I know when you climb down a mountain, it becomes harder than when you climb up because you can just see the next steps. So I don't know, was there any like near misses, like scary moments, or you were just focused and like, okay, now I gotta face my
Yeah,
punishment?
it was. That's the thing is it's a lot. I think this is what people don't like about the story because it makes it real and it makes it something attainable. But it was incredibly easy. Everyone could do it. I think if you gave me enough time and if it was a cool enough day, I could take my grandma all the way up and bring her all the way down.
Mhm.
It's not a
Mhm.
difficult climb or hike. I mean, the whole thing's 45 degrees and the steps are small and uniform, so it's not what to expect every time because it's just steps. Yeah, some of them are like broken and
Mhm.
missing and different than the other ones. But if you take two steps to the left and then you have a clear path again. So it's um yeah, so anyway, so they take me into the police car, which was it was just a truck that they use. And um at this point they didn't drive me like into town or anything. There was a police station at the pyramid site. So they like tourist police, and I think there's a lot of panhandlers go there. So it wasn't like dangerous criminals, but a lot of panhandlers and like other tourists. And like I'm far from the first person to climb the pyramid. There's a lot of different examples. There's a Japanese pastime for a long time. There was blogs and stuff written in Japanese. In fact, most of the information on how to do it sneakily, because I went back and I researched a lot after the fact. there's whole Japanese sort of communities dedicated to climbing the pyramids at night and then leaving in the morning so no one notices, and which guard to bribe and where to pass and blah blah. And I'm sure evolves constantly over time. But yeah, so there's that, and then a lot of protesters will climb and hang an Israeli flag, and I don't want to get into all that, but people will climb it out of many different reasons, right? Excitement, protest, etc. So they have a jail right next to the pyramid site. In fact, through the window the whole time I was there, I could see the pyramids. So I got my fill of the pyramids for a lifetime. I spent a couple of days staring at them, which brings me to yeah. So I spoke to there was a sort of head Egyptologist at the pyramid site, and he came with a big book. And he was the first person that I spoke to, and he was the last person that spoke English the whole time I was there. Um, so don't don't commit crimes in foreign countries because they don't, whether you speak their language or not, they have their processes. So I spoke to this guy, and he was really nice. He was the head Egyptologist of the pyramid site. So he was big dog kind of guy, and he had a big book, and he had a series of questions that he always asks. And the main things were like, did you move anything? Did you break anything? Did you carve anything? All that has to be sort of documented, and so they have a record, because it is an ancient artifact as well as a world wonder. So I said no, and then I asked him because he spoke really good English, and I didn't know how long it would be until I got an answer. They'd already taken my passport and everything, and now I did have the foresight. And you mentioned this is a little fun Mission Impossible part of the story.
How were like the police guys that were arresting you when you said like, okay, so they wouldn't let you go anymore? Were they
Yeah,
kind of
so
angry or just like,
they wouldn't let me go. They had firm grips on my hands, but I was also cooperating. So this is probably a thing because I knew like at
Mhm.
this point, like at this point, running is silly. Like a thousand people just saw me do it. And the police are surrounded. There's a giant fence. I'm in a city. I don't speak Arabic. There's no way I'm getting anywhere. So it's not like I had a big idea to break free and get any crazy ideas. They had a firm grip, but they led me to the van. And the van, it wasn't like armored or anything. It was just like a pickup truck. They put me in the back of the pickup truck in just the seatbelt on, and then they sat in the front. And then we drove like 4 minutes or whatever to the police station. I get out of there. They bring me into a room. They ask for my documents. I give them my documents. And it's all like through gestures, blah blah. And then I didn't really speak to anybody until this Egyptologist guy. So I speak to him, and he asked me a bunch of questions, and then I ask him. I was like, "So how long? Like, what usually happens to people?" And he's like, he kind of rolls his eyes, and obviously very like deals with this pretty often. Kind of rolls his eyes, and he's like, "Look, you're gonna stay here for a little bit," which my heart sank, and I and then he was like, "And then they're gonna process a fine, and then you'll be out of here." I was like, "Okay, okay, sweet. That's it. I'll wait here and bring me my fine, and I'll pay for it." Do you guys take debit cards? Um, and turns out no, not only do they not take debit cards, but they don't use for this, they don't use computers and like processes, and it's all like stamped and like across the city and like this courthouse and signature and wait for this to open and talk to this person and like 12 people involved to give you a fine, and then there's 12 more people involved for you to pay it. And then the whole time you have to be in their custody because you are in trouble. Again, this is the part. This is the part where I got scared for the first time. So they brought me to a um they brought me to a room with like desks and stuff, and then there was like a jail cell, like bars on the doors, right in the middle, and inside there was a bunch of people, and then the guy sort of unlocks the door and he like gestures with his head. He's like, "Go in," and I'm like, and then he's like, "Yeah." So then I go inside and they closed me. And it was a small room. It's actually smaller than the top of the pyramid, and I was in there with like 11 other people. No one spoke English. I did meet a couple people that spoke English. There was a South Sudanese guy that was he was caught on a fake visa or something. So he was there. He spoke English, and then a guy from Dubai, and they both have really sad stories. I sort of realized that like there's no delineation. Like yes, some of the people here are just like panhandlers and not dangerous criminals, but then they also keep the danger. They kept everyone together. So yeah, so it was a little bit spooky, especially for a 22-year-old. You know, I grew up in Canada, and okay, well, I'm from the Balkans, and it can get rough and tough there, and I spent a lot of time there, but nothing like this. You know, I'd never since or before experienced anything like this. And so I put my face like right on the bars, and then just like wait, and every time someone passed, I try and get attention and see if anyone speaks English and blah blah. And eventually, they did give me some slack. They pulled me out and they let me like sit at the desk and like breathe for a little bit because they could tell I was freaking out. But I think that's only due to my passport because no one else there was treated like me. In fact, it was really violent at times, like people hitting each other and slapping each other. And I think because of the way that I speak and because of my Western passport, they were easier on me, but also protective of me. So then the other guys didn't. Long story short, I was there for 3 days while they were processing this fine, and part of my day to day was not sleep ever. But I don't think I slept the whole time I was there. I did at one point put my head like in the corner of a wall and with my shoulders sort of pressed up against it. I got like a little micro nap. But yeah, I was in and out of the jail cell, and then they would every morning, so twice, they would put us in like they would handcuff us all together. So you're handcuffed to one person on your left, one person on your right, and then they put you in like a real armored military vehicle, and they drive you through Cairo, which was crazy because it didn't have windows; it just had like little slits that you could look through. So I'd look out and I'd see like other tourists in Cairo and like families going like the museum and like people that like look like me or my age, like from the hostel, um, checking Google Maps or waiting for a taxi or whatever. And that was the biggest realization is, oh, like this could, and again, no one's speaking, so no one can tell me how long it's going to be. The two guys that's less than, but the two guys that spoke English in my jail cell didn't really have any information. So one of the guys scared me. I was like, yeah, I was like, well, but basically anything you do in Egypt is a minimum 2 years. And I was like, 2 years? I can't stay in Egypt for 2 years. Um, And then, but it's funny because it would come in waves. I would panic about the existential dread of staying in jail for 2 years. But then you sort of get used to it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just be here and I'll learn Arabic and it'll be like I studied abroad. That was my justification. So it's funny, and I don't know if that's my brain or if that's just generally how people cope with situations where they're locked up abroad. But that's how I coped, and then it would come in waves, so it'd be panic and then just like bliss and panic and bliss and panic and bliss, and the more things changed around me, the more it would fluctuate. But yeah, so the second day we went to the courthouse, thing was read out, and then they took the handcuffs off of me, and I went into a separate vehicle, so it was that same pickup truck that initially picked me up, and we drove to another place where they had my passport in front of me, and my GoPro, and then someone that spoke English, and they explained to me that they were taking the camera and like the memory card and whatever, and they were going to destroy it. I was like, okay, no problem. And then I was going to get my passport back when they processed my fine, and then I can go back to the jail cell. So I was like, okay, not that I have an option. I agree. I agree to your terms.
Did you
So,
get any lawyer, anything? Nothing. It was just, okay, like it's
right.
your
So
problem.
no, so that's the funny part. So obviously they give you a phone call. And again, I don't know if they do this to everybody, but they definitely do it if you're foreign. So I called the Canadian embassy. And there is a Canadian embassy in Cairo, but who I got when I called was a call center based in like Ottawa, Ontario or something. And the guy that answered, he was answering the phone as if I was ordering a pizza. He was like, "Hey, thank you for calling Canada. Can I take your order?" Um, so the guy that answered the phone was super casual and then extremely nice, like polite, as Canadians are, but exceptionally unhelpful. He did nothing. What they ended up providing for me, this is hilarious, is he said, and he repeated this many times as if it's script. He's like, Canada can't interfere with the criminal proceedings of another country. It's only after you get whatever you're getting, and then you can look for like extradition options and whatever. But while you're in it, you can't do it. He's like, so here's what I can do. I can email you a list of lawyers, of Canadian lawyers in Cairo. And I was like, fantastic. That does not help me in the slightest. I was like, I don't know if you know, but I don't have my phone in here with me. So yeah, so he emailed me a list of lawyers in Egypt. But yeah, so that was the phone call and the help and the legal counsel that I had and the rest of it. And even if I did, I mean, it was all in Arabic, so I'd have to also have a translator. And I mean, I don't exactly know how it works, but spend money. And I wasn't about to do any of that. I think it would have added to the anxiety. I think I was just ready to sort of take my punishment, especially after a few days now of being there and eating very little, sleeping very little. drinking very little water. It's again, I was young, so you kind of heal like Wolverine, and you're a little bit more durable back then. We get back to the police station at the pyramid site, and um, two police officers come, and they tell me to follow them. So I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm finally leaving.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
day 3. So it was 2 nights that I spent there. It was the night after the climb, and then a full day and a full night, and this was the 3rd day. So the two police officers come, and I'd never seen these guys before, and they all had like their ranks sort of on their shoulders on their uniform. It was like 3-star, 2-star, 1-star, but 1-star was better than 3-star, and then there was just like different colored stripes. And anyway, these guys came in and they had some like serious like stripes. So I knew they were like decision makers. I was like, okay, these are my guys. They're gonna take me out. I'm gonna pay my fine, and then I'm done. And then so they say follow me, and I follow them, and uh we walked past like places in the jail that I hadn't been. Like there was a whole women's section where the women were actually kept in like hip height cages. And I only saw it for a glimpse, for a quick glimpse, a split second. But I don't know how long they were in there, or if they were just sort of holding there and being transferred into a cell. But there was a legitimate sort of, you know, like the size of like a cage for like a large animal, and the women were all sort of seated in there. It was too short to stand up, even for the shorter ones. So they're all seated there, and then I walk past that, so that's scares the shit out of me. And then I walk into a hallway, and then down some stairs, and then we go down some stairs, and there's a hallway of cells, like cell doors and like the sliding thing, and like you see in movies with like solitary confinement. That's sort of what it looks like, long white hallway. The one of the police officers standing behind me, one of the officers in front of me, and he unlocks the door to the jail cell. And then sorry, just give me 1 second.
All right, apparently it's time for an unexpected break. I'm gonna use that time to ask you guys about your opinion. If you enjoyed the video so far and you wanna see more of crazy and mind-blowing travel stories, please let me know in the comment or hit the like button. Thanks.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm back. We can cut out the middle part, yeah?
So
Yeah.
you were saying, okay, you went down that dark alleyway with the jail cells. All right.
Yeah, so
What
he
happened then?
he opens the jail cell, and the door opens, and it's like something I've never seen before in my entire life. I haven't even seen this in movies. But it was a dark room, so it was a jail cell, and there were people in there, and it was a dark room. Like I said, we went downstairs into the ground, so it was cold and wet, and there was no light. And Egyptians they're like me, like they're darker naturally, and it's very sunny in Egypt, so they get even darker in the summer, which are in September when I was there. And the people who were in here were white as white as this AirPod case. They were white. That means they had been away from the sun in this dark room for a very, very long time. And they were, again, I didn't understand the language. They were speaking Arabic, but it didn't sound like the Arabic from the guys upstairs. They didn't it sounded like barking. It sounded like yelling, and then they were yelling at, and it was sort of indiscriminate. Like they were yelling at each other and yelling at the guards, and the guard was kind of gesturing at them to get back away from the door, and they were like holding each other, and it was just a weird situation. They looked. I hesitate to say anything bad about them because it's a horrible condition that they were kept in, but but they were barely recognizable as humans through no fault of their own. Um, so at this point, I'm as scared as I've ever been in my entire life, and I say, um, scared shitless. I only now understand that term because I saw what was happening, and my asshole clenched, and it's happened very few times in my life, and never to that degree, where I couldn't feel my legs, and my hands went completely numb, and yeah, you go through this like thought process where like, okay, well now I'm fucked. Now I'm fucked. I'm gonna be living in a hole with people in the dark, and nothing can really prepare you for that. So you start to have these crazy thoughts. So I'm like, okay, well, there's only two of these guys, and if they want me in there, they're gonna have to put me in there. There's no way I'm walking freely into this situation. And yeah, crazy, awful things go through your mind at that point. Yeah, I'll fight the guys. I'll take their gun. I'll run up the stairs. It's all sort of it's 100% survival in that moment. And then in that moment, while that's all playing out in my head, and I haven't blinked now for like a few minutes, and he's like sort of gesturing with his head, he bursts out laughing, and the guy behind me starts laughing, and the two cops are laughing, and they're killing themselves laughing. And he slams the door shut and he locks it, and just like that crazy hellscape that existed in my life for a few seconds was gone, locked away forever. The monster was locked away. And then so they start laughing, and they hit me on the shoulder, and they kept repeating Amada or Hamada or something like that. I don't want to butcher it, but it's something like, you idiots, or you fool. They're sort of laughing, and they're grabbing my shoulder and shaking me and sort of shaking me out of it. But I've just gone through like an emotional roller coaster in my head, felt feelings that I never felt before. So I was, it took me a second to sort of start playing along. And then they take me upstairs. We get out and drive me to that place where my passport was and stuff with all my documents. And then we pick up this guy who's he works for the jail and the law and whatever in some capacity. He wasn't in uniform. He was just in a white shirt and he spoke English. So he explained to me that like I'll have to pull out cash to pay the fine, and sort of explaining what was going to happen. And then also at this point, I haven't showered in 3 days, and in the Egyptian heat and stress sweating, and I probably smelled awful. I was in a car, so sort of packed tightly in the back seat with these guys. But they were in good spirits, and the guy was speaking English, so I was a little bit more comfortable now and whatever. But about halfway there, we stopped at like a street vendor for food, so we could all get food. And the guy asked me, "Do you want some?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want some." So he gave it to me, and then he asked me for the money to pay for all of us to eat. So that was pretty cool. I sort of bought my way into their hearts with food, and then we made it there. They gave me back my passport. They never gave me back my GoPro. They took the GoPro, thinking that they took all the footage and all the pictures, which fair enough. They let me keep my passport, and they gave back my phone. When that was over, the fine was I can't remember what it was in Egyptian pounds, but I do remember because that's what it sort of reflected on my account. It was the equivalent of about 60 Canadian dollars, so 40 euros. That was the fine. That was what I waited 3 days in jail for. Yeah, again, I can't remember the conversion, but I remember sort of in my banking app, like looking at that number over and over again. I could not believe that it was 3 days of hell, and again, like looking back, like nothing actually happened to me. I wasn't harmed. I was a little bit hungry and a little bit smelly, but it was that fear and anxiety building and coming in waves, and especially at the end there. Um, it was a wild experience that I wouldn't recommend for anybody, but I don't regret in the slightest. It was two of the most like important moments of my life, standing on top of the pyramid alone, and sort of taking in that ancient world and having a unique experience to enjoy the beauty of the peak of the ancient world by myself. And then here's the fun part too, is after 3 days of being locked up abroad, I had a flight to catch. So I'd left the police station, and I had my documents and I had everything. I was like, okay, I need to go back to my hostel, explain to them what happened, pack my bags, get to the airport, and then fly to, because this was 2018, this was my big trip. I was like, I gotta go to the next place. So I'm still kind of shaking from this whole ordeal, and I take a taxi to the hostel, and then I get there, and they're like, "What the hell happened?" Because remember, there was a guy from my hostel that was there that watched the whole thing happen, and he got out of there as fast as he could. Um, after that, but he explained to them what happened. So then I came and I told them I was like, sorry, and I paid for the extra nights, and I collected my bags and got another taxi, got to the airport. I'm at the airport, and I'm still sort of paranoid, especially now you're dealing with like, officials in uniform, and I still have like a little bit of that, I don't, it's not post trauma. I don't like fear uniforms, but just in that moment, because for 3 days without sleeping, I was used to having a certain type of interaction with people in uniform, and they're wearing the same uniforms. It's the same sort of, it's the Egyptian TSA or whatever, white uniforms with like little shoulder pads, all speaking Arabic, and it was a reflection of exactly that. So the whole time I'm thinking, oh, like they're processing again, and then I give someone my passport, and then I start sweating. Like, are they going to give my passport back? Is it like in the
Hmm.
system? And thankfully, no system. Everything's stamps and signatures. So I didn't have trouble at all. But it was, again, it was mentally, it was there. I get on the plane and we're on the tarmac and I close my eyes and I took like a 4 minute nap. Like I closed my eyes and then I woke up right away. And then we were still on the tarmac and everyone was just kind of like rustling around and I was like, oh no, they stopped the plane, they're gonna pull me off. This is it. I'm going back. They're taking me back to Egyptian jail. And the pilot comes on and he's like, thank you for flying with Egyptian Airlines. We have arrived in Bangkok. The temperature outside is X, Y, and Z. So I slept through the entire takeoff, the entire, I think it's like a 4.5, 5 hour flight, 6 hours maybe, um, landing, and I was in Bangkok, but in my mind, only 4 minutes had passed because I hadn't slept for three
Yeah.
days. So I made it. I was there. I was in Bangkok, and I still smelled awful. I get through Bangkok security, which is funny because they get so many like hippies coming in to like go to pie or whatever. They're used to people being smelly and sort
Yeah.
of unclothed, and I had long hair and it was all kind of stuck together, and I looked like I was heading straight for pie. Is what I looked like. So yeah, so they let me through. They gave me my visa, and then and now I'm in Bangkok. So now here's the interesting thing because the contrast between literally being locked up in a country like Egypt that has very very strict laws and culture to the absolute generational freedom of Bangkok in a less than 24-hour period. And then I checked into my hostel and I showered and I took a little nap and I woke up and people were buzzing and it was all people my age and Western accents and everyone was speaking English. And I sat down at the bar, still sort of like reeling because I fell asleep and I still dreamed that I was in the jail cell. And everyone's buzzing and I sit down at the bar and I order a beer. It was my very first Chang. And it's sitting in front of me and I'm looking at this like, golden beer and I'm a little bit parched because I hadn't drank enough in the past 3 days. And there's beautiful tourist girls around me and guys and everyone's having fun and playing beer pong and I couldn't believe the contrast. I had to sit there for a minute and for sure that was a unique experience that I wouldn't trade. So yeah, so short answer is I can't regret it because those moments are such cornerstones of my personality. Um, that I got to find out and experience and yeah, so I was safe and sound in Bangkok, and then that's the Egypt story.
I do have another question. So, because this is the really interesting story is so the police officially took away your footage, right? I want to know, what did you record the footage with? Did you record like the whole trip up and down? And how did you manage to still have that footage? Because I've had a preview on it and it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, so it's like I said, I called it CIA Jason Bourne before, but it's I put the GoPro in my mouth and I hit the record button and I started climbing. So I have footage going all the way up the pyramid. And then when I was up there, I took pictures and videos on the GoPro of myself on the top of the pyramid, of the top of the pyramid itself, of the view of the city, and then but I knew some part of me knew either they were going to make me delete the footage or take my camera, which is what they ended up doing. What I did was I took the memory card out of the GoPro and I put it in my waistband. So for the 3 days that I was in there, it was in my underwear, digging into my skin. And then I become aware of it, and I'd be like, oh no, like now after day two, if they find this, like they're gonna be pissed. So I kept like twirling my waistband until it was like there's like a little thin thing with like a memory card in it. And I also didn't want to lose it, so I was like constantly checking, which you can imagine like looks pretty funny. And I'm checking to see if it's in my waistband all the time, and among the other things that I'm stressed about, I'm still like I gotta make sure I have those pictures. I gotta make sure I got the videos. Um, but I knew they were so, and they did actually. They asked me to open my GoPro and show them what the footage that I made. So I had a memory card in my phone as well. So I switched that over to my GoPro, and then I shot extra footage that I could delete in front of them. I took a bunch of videos and pictures, and actually I have like a whole like apology video of me sort of saying how much I loved Egypt and how wonderful it is, and I didn't want them to think that I was protesting in any way. And I had that thought when I was at the top. I was like, oh no, I don't want them to think that this had any purpose other than the curiosity and like you said, adventure. I was a 22-year-old idiot. I'm not an activist in any meaningful way. But yeah, so then when they looked at the GoPro, they deleted the footage and then they kept the GoPro and they were satisfied with that. They didn't search anything else. In fact, for most of the time I was in there, they didn't even take my phone away from me until like quite a while. So I was messaging my friend Andy throughout it. I was able to like get word out of like what was happening to me. And like I didn't tell my mom or my sister. I didn't want to worry anybody, but I told some people, to like if anything happens, if you don't hear from me, this is basically where I am and what's happening. And wish me luck. It's a pretty wild experience. But yeah, so I smuggled the footage out of Egypt, and it was in my waistband. And when I got to Bangkok, I put it on my laptop, and then I watched all the footage. And yeah, it's been I've told the story now so many times to so many different kinds of people. Everyone's fascinated by it, and of course, it's a pretty unique story. I say I get some pushback sometimes. I maintain that it was harmless, and um, sort of the punishment fit the crime. I inconvenienced people, but I was inconvenienced, and that's fair. I don't think I was punished too harshly. Um, I don't think I wasn't punished enough. But yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because again, I do get some people are on my side with it completely. Some people are, you know, everyone should climb the pyramids and everyone should do their own thing, and everyone should be allowed, and theories left, right, and center. But I'm curious to hear your opinion.
So, my opinion on the matter is the official one is like, oh my God, how could you dare doing that? Like, that is so disrespectful to the culture, to the country. Oh my God, you're disgrace to humanity. Yeah, I think you're actually a fucking legend. The thing is, so I know why they said you shouldn't do it in general. And I highly agree that it is illegal because first, I know there will be a stupid tourist taking a selfie, falling back down and just breaking their neck. Plus, if it's thousands and millions of people going up there every single year, I know that it's going to be a problem at some point. And then you have people like carving stuff in, spraying graffiti, like, yeah, putting up flags of countries and stuff like this. So I get it that they're pretty strict on it. I still, my personal view is there, yeah, there are certain things, certain experiences you have to do. And just because it is a law doesn't necessarily mean it is true. Because as we saw, the law has changed over the years. And up until the 80s, the law was you can do whatever you want to. And then at some point, they decide to do it. So for the majority of people, it's good. I find it's pretty okay that you got punished. Um, but I also think there are certain gray zones and stuff that you just gotta do where you gotta play the system. We are on this planet like one time.
Yeah.
It's like a level game. Not everyone wants to go up there. If I ask my parents, they're like, "Well, what the fuck should I do up there? Like, I can just fly a drone or buy some footage." But it's if you want this experience, and I'm one of these people as well. Like, I love experience. I want to be there, and like, okay, I know I gotta bear the consequences, but I want certain experiences, and I'll make my way to these experiences no matter what they call. But sometimes it's really you have to trust your intuition and just go for it. Yeah, I think
We're
so.
on the same page there. And yeah, I don't regret it. I got a lot of repeat value from telling that story, from experiencing that story, from knowing those things about myself. My comfort zone was so non-existent at this point. I I felt like I had to reach the pinnacle, had to reach the top of the pyramid, of stepping outside my comfort zone to like to fully have an understanding of that. And again, I think that's fair as long as it doesn't step on anybody's toes. And I think the damage is so minimal, and the punishment was so fitting. So I think my karma at least is even. I think I got what I needed out of it, and then. But I mean, again, that's from my perspective, and it might be a selfish one, and I'm not stupid. I know that I'm not trying to fully justify my actions. I wouldn't recommend anyone do it, and I wouldn't. I'm glad I did it the first time, but I'll never do that again. That one
Yeah,
specifically.
I think so too. Like it's just a once in a lifetime thing. It will be interesting. So I mean, most of the people that you meet traveling, like they definitely like the story. What did your family actually say about it?
So okay, so that's funny. My mom didn't know until right after. But I don't think so. So 2018 was a weird one because I told everybody for a long time that I was going to do it. I was going to travel for a year, and then I was going to go to all these places. And I don't think in the first place, I don't think anyone believed it. They were like, okay, well, he's been gone for 6 months now, so surely he'll come home anytime. And then, July came and went, and August came and went, and now I'm into September, and September is pretty much the end of the year. It's the end of summer anyway. So they had only at that point started to realize like, oh, he's really doing exactly what he said. And then again, by that point, I'd been through so many things, and I lost my passport, and I can keep listing things that happened to me that year. It was a crazy year. But it was like every other week that I was that I was coming to my parents with like a crazy story, something life changing that happened to me and whatever. So at this point they were used to it. So now this is like an extreme example of that. So obviously they were surprised, but they had been so surprised and and shocked and wowed leading up to it all that year that it was at that point it was just another drop in the bucket. It was just like, I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad you're okay. A lot of people asked if I'm, and a lot of people still ask if I'm allowed in Egypt. Absolutely, I am. They made that very clear. A fine's a fine, and I paid the fine, and I'm subject to the same visa and travel restrictions as any other Canadian. But outside of that, there's there's no restriction. So yeah, so people they were curious about that, and that that was it. Everyone sort of likes the story, but I don't think, like I said, at that point, things had been so many things had happened that no one was shocked by anything anymore. What would have shocked them is if I got a regular job and a wife and had a kid. I think that would have, like, the normal people stuff. I think that would have shocked them. If I went to
Yeah.
university, for example, I think that would have shocked them much more.
When you start going these steps, like let's say going abroad, and it's just kind of like step by step, you expand your comfort zone and just everything becomes so normal. I think sometimes it's actually pretty good that the universe kind of like pushes you a little bit, like a little bit back, so that you stop and kind of like reflect on the actions and think about, okay, how do I want to approach the things in the near future? Because otherwise, like at some point, you just believe, okay, I'm completely unstoppable. I'm God. I can do whatever I want to. Like I don't have to respect any rules. And that is something where usually it ends up then people mostly killing themselves, I would say, with stupid stuff. I do have 4 questions, dude. Like it's these quick questions that I fucking love them, man. Maybe
Yeah,
you
let's
can
go
just answer
rapid
them
fire.
like with yeah, rapid fire. If you had a nickname in jail, what would it have been?
It would have been, so I did kind of. They called me Visa, because I think it was the first word that I reacted to because it was the first word that I recognized, and I think maybe they thought somehow they could get some cash off of me. Again, I look different. I have a Canadian passport, stuff like that. So Visa was my
Visa.
jail nickname. Yeah,
1 word to describe the Egyptian jail.
brown. The
Love it.
dust,
Love
the
it.
color of the walls, the uniform, the the heat sort of relates to that. It was the bathroom was I can't even say that on this podcast. Can't even describe what I saw in the
Yeah.
bathroom here. So yeah, brown, I think.
What will be another, let's say, world wonder or anything like any experience that is comparable to this that you've done so far?
There are pyramids all over the world, really. And
Mm.
some are not as touristic as the other ones. And some are not as heavily regulated and they're not as big and beautiful. But there are pyramids in Guatemala and in Mexico. For me, and nothing comes close to my experience with the pyramids. But anytime
Yeah.
you have a moment, even if it's internal, to sort of just like put your hand on the Colosseum in Rome and or the Taj Mahal, and just have a moment, sort of being there and being present with it. So yeah, those ones. Anytime you're in direct contact, I think, with a world wonder, an ancient structure, an ancient artifact, and you're alone with it. You're having like a personal moment with it.
I ask you Machu Picchu or pyramids for you personally?
For me personally, pyramid, but depends what you're asking. The pyramids are much more impressive than anything I've ever seen because of when they were built and how large they are. Um, Machu Picchu and even Christ the Redeemer, although Christ the Redeemer was built with modern tools, so it's a little bit easier. But just because of where they're built, they're completely inaccessible on a mountaintop.
Mm.
They're impressive feats of like human ingenuity and endurance. Because I imagine dragging stones and building materials up a mountain isn't fun and isn't easy. But neither is building a giant thousands of blocks in a pyramid for over 100 years, or we still don't know exactly how they did it. And
Yeah,
again, it's a
that's
whole
yeah.
conversation for another time. Is what and who and why, and yeah, those are fun conversations.
One last question, okay, which I found pretty cool. Is if you could send one message from the top of the pyramid to the world, what would it be?
Oh, You know that I don't know if you've seen the movie Miss Congeniality, but it's an FBI agent and she's really like rough and tough. And then she has to pretend to be a beauty pageant thing, and everyone's talking about how they want if you could change one thing. It's a similar question to what you just asked, if you could change one thing or if you tell everyone. And all the girls that sort of portrayed as like ditzy blondes, they all say the same thing. They're like, I want world peace. And then she says somewhere like in the middle of the movie, she says, I want harsher punishments for criminals, like for violent offenders, blah, blah, blah. Something like, that kind of sort of makes sense. That's not
Mhm.
just ditzy world peace. But by the end of the movie, where she showed of sort of showing all this love, she starts crying and she's like, I really do want world peace. So I think with that power in my hands, and as silly as it sounds, one message to the whole world is sort of be nicer to each other, and yeah, be kinder to your fellow man. One message and send it to everybody, and everyone gets it at the same time, and maybe that would, at least for a day, it would make people kinder. Yeah. So like Miss
Um,
Congeniality, I really do want world peace.
no, man, love it. That was a great story,
Yeah.
honestly. I fucking loved it.
Yeah, Mr. Dominic Toretto, we've been at this for an hour. Maybe it's time to call it a podcast, and we'll do another one of these soon.
All right, guys, if you liked the video and you would like to see more of Mr. Bane, crazy experiences, or inspiring travel content in general, please let me know in the comments. And give it a thumbs up if you think that it was worth it.
Cool. Talk to you soon, brother.
Talk to you soon, brother.
And never forget, stay wild, stay free. See you next time.